Once again, the Queen of Consorts surprises us, but not in a good way.
Made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fears and fueled paranoia.
The palace did not erupt with shouting at first. It went silent. That was what made the moment so dangerous. Camilla had expected another private briefing, another dry folder, another careful palace update wrapped in tradition. Instead, she found a succession document altered by William to strengthen Catherine's future position, and in that instant, the room around her seemed to lose its air. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla held the folder a little longer than she needed to, as if the weight of the paper itself had changed. The succession document, a private planning file that mapped future royal roles, duties, and authority inside the monarchy, had never been meant to wound anyone. It was supposed to guide the next chapter with calm language and careful order. Yet the Queen Consort saw Catherine's name placed where she never expected to find it. Not tucked away as support, not mentioned gently as a future partner, but written into the structure with power, protection, and unmistakable importance. Camilla read the line once, then she read it again. The words did not soften, they grew sharper. William had changed more than a paragraph. He had changed the emotional balance of the family. The amendment gave Catherine ceremonial and advisory privileges that would normally wait until the prince had fully stepped into his reign. And that mattered, because palace access was never just about meetings. It was about influence. It was about who heard the truth first. It was about whose voice could shape decisions before the public ever knew a decision existed. Camilla understood that. Charles understood it too. And somewhere behind the clean phrasing, the future king had made a choice that placed his wife closer to the center of the crown than anyone around Camilla had warned her to expect. Camilla's eyes stopped on the initials beside the amendment. William had not hidden behind aides. He had not allowed the machinery of the palace to absorb the blame. The prince had marked the change himself, and that small sign carried more force than any speech could have done. The Queen Consort felt the sting of it in silence. She was not simply reading about Catherine's rise. She was reading proof that the future had moved without asking her permission. For a moment, she did not look angry. She looked replaced. Charles received the news before Camilla reached the corridor. An aide told the king she had seen the altered file, and he lowered his gaze as if the crown itself had suddenly become heavier. He knew what would come next. Camilla would want an answer. William would refuse to retreat. Catherine would be pulled into a storm she had not started. And the monarch would be forced toward the choice he had feared most: defend the woman beside him, or protect the son who was already shaping the reign to come. But the document was only paper until the people named inside it began to understand what it would cost them. At the center of the crisis were not seals, signatures, or ancient rules. There were 4 people, each staring at the same future from a different wound. Camilla saw rejection. William saw protection. Catherine saw a burden she had never asked to carry so soon. Charles saw a family line tightening around him, and suddenly the crown felt less like power and more like judgment. Camilla sat alone after the briefing, her hand still resting on the folder, as though removing it would make the truth more permanent. The Queen Consort had survived whispers, cold rooms, old loyalties, and years of being measured against ghosts. But this felt different. This was not public criticism. This was private rearrangement. The altered document gave Catherine a defined place in the future monarchy, meaning she would not simply stand beside William later, but be protected inside the structure, before any public transition was even announced. That mattered, because palace power often begins long before a title changes. It begins with access. It begins with who is invited into the room. Charles had tried for years to hold 2 loyalties in the same hand. He loved Camilla, and the king knew how much she had endured to stand beside him. But he also knew William and Catherine were no longer distant figures waiting politely at the edge of the next reign. They were the next reign. The document forced that truth into the open. A succession planning file, a private guide used to prepare future roles and duties before they become public, was supposed to keep the monarchy steady. Instead, it exposed the painful question no one wanted to ask aloud. Was the palace still protecting the present, or had it already started serving the future? Catherine received the warning quietly from a senior aide, but her calm did not last. She understood at once that her name had become the heart of a storm she had not requested. The princess had carried duty with grace, but this was heavier than duty. This was position. This was influence. This was the kind of recognition that made one person stronger and made another feel smaller. Catherine knew Camilla would see the amendment not only as William's defense of his wife, but as a sign that the queen consort's place could be narrowed while she was still inside the palace. William did not see it as cruelty. The prince saw it as survival. He had not merely asked for ceremonial recognition, meaning public honor attached to royal duties and events. He had argued that Catherine needed real protection, because the monarchy after Charles could not afford confusion, delay, or quiet resistance from older palace circles. The future king believed his wife had become essential to public trust, and he refused to let her role depend on anyone's mood, memory, or permission. Charles had seen an earlier draft, but the final language cut deeper than he expected. The king noticed the sharper wording. He noticed the confidence in it. He noticed William's hand behind every careful sentence. And when the prince learned Camilla had read the file, he did not apologize. He asked to see his father before anyone else could speak. And buried beneath that meeting was the moment that had made William decide Catherine could no longer be left unprotected. Every palace crisis has a beginning that looks harmless, until history turns back and points to it. For William, the turning point was not a speech, not a ceremony, not a public insult. It was a private dinner at Windsor, when Catherine was quietly excluded from a future planning conversation, and the silence around the table told him everything he needed to know. William remembered the dinner because nothing about it had seemed dangerous at first. Charles wanted calm. Camilla wanted order. Catherine wanted to listen before speaking. The prince wanted proof that the next chapter would be handled fairly. A Windsor succession dinner, a private palace meal, where senior royals and advisors discuss future roles before any public announcement was meant to prepare the family for change, not expose the cracks beneath it. Yet that evening became the trigger, because every polite sentence carried a hidden message about who mattered now and who could be made to wait. Charles listened as two senior advisors moved through future ceremonial duties, the public honors and responsibilities that show who stands close to the crown. The king nodded at first, believing the discussion was controlled. Camilla stayed composed beside him, hearing her own influence over transitional household decisions clearly protected in the planning note. But Catherine's role was softened. Her name was moved into gentler language. Her future place was described with care, but not with force. William noticed it. The prince noticed the pause before her name. He noticed the way the room did not fight for her. Catherine did not protest. That was what struck William hardest. The princess kept her face steady, but her hands folded together after the advisor passed over her authority as if it were something too delicate to name. She had endured pressure before, but this felt colder because it came wrapped in politeness. Camilla did not interrupt. The queen consort did not correct the wording. Charles did not challenge it quickly enough. William felt anger rise in him, quiet and controlled, because Catherine was not asking for power. She was simply being denied protection. The sentence came near the end. One advisor said Catherine's authority could wait for the proper reign, and the room moved on as though nothing had happened. But William did not move on. The prince heard the danger inside those words. He understood that tradition, when used by the wrong hands, could become a delay. Delay could become weakness, weakness could become exclusion, and the woman expected to stand beside him through the next monarchy could be left dependent on people who had already shown they were willing to soften her place. William left that dinner with his mind made colder. Catherine walked beside him in silence, and he knew she had felt it too, even if she refused to say so. Charles believed the evening had ended without open damage. Camilla believed the old order had held, but the future king saw something else. He saw a warning. After that night, he ordered the succession document reviewed, and the first alteration began as one sentence before becoming a declaration of future control. By the time Camilla found the changed document, William was no longer reacting to one slight. He was answering an entire system. The confrontation did not happen in a grand hall. It happened in a private room, where no cameras waited, no crowd listened, and no one could hide behind ceremony. Camilla entered first, wounded and controlled. William followed, calm but unyielding. When the door closed, the palace lost its witnesses, and the future king was finally forced to defend the line he had crossed. Camilla placed the folder on the table with careful force. The queen consort did not throw it. She did not let anger make her careless. That restraint made the moment colder. The succession document, the private file used to shape future royal duties and influence before the public sees any change, sat between them like evidence in a trial. She had already confirmed the initials beside the most controversial amendment. William's mark was there. His choice was there. And Catherine's name had been lifted into a place that made Camilla feel the future had moved around her without warning. William stood across from her and did not look away. The prince knew this was not just about ink, or rolls, or palace planning. It was about pain. It was about the queen consort seeing Catherine's protection as her own rejection. Camilla asked him whether loyalty now came second to his wife's position. Her voice stayed low, but every word cut cleanly. She wanted him to admit he had crossed a personal line. She wanted him to understand that power inside the monarchy was never neutral. When one person rose, another often felt the floor shift beneath them. William answered without raising his voice. That made Camilla listen, even when she did not want to. The prince said Catherine had earned protection because she had carried pressure others only discussed. He said the princess had stood through public judgment, family storms, and the long shadow of expectation without asking the palace to save her. A ceremonial privilege, a formal royal honor, or duty that signals public importance was not enough, he argued, if the people behind closed doors could still delay her authority when the next reign came. Camilla's composure cracked for a moment. She accused William of rewriting the emotional map of the monarchy before Charles had even finished his reign. The queen consort said he had not simply defended Catherine, he had sent a message that the current court was already being judged by the future one. William did not deny the force of it. He revealed, through a documented palace account prepared for the king, that advisors had warned him Catherine could be left vulnerable during a transition period, the sensitive time when one reign prepares to give way to another. That warning had changed everything. Charles entered before either of them could soften. The king saw the folder. He saw Camilla's wounded face. He saw William's steady silence. In that instant, he understood both sides were no longer asking to be heard. They were asking to be chosen. Camilla wanted her place defended. William wanted Catherine protected. And Charles knew this was no longer only a family dispute. It had become a test of where real power now lived. Charles had spent his life waiting for the crown, only to discover that some decisions arrive when authority feels most fragile. He could sign, delay, reject, or revise. Yet the deeper truth sat before him in black ink. William was already acting like a king. Catherine was already being positioned like a queen. And Camilla was already fighting the feeling of being left behind. Charles reviewed the altered document in private, and the silence around him felt heavier than anger. The king read the final paragraph once, then again, searching for a softer meaning that simply was not there. The advisory structure, the planned circle of royal voices, allowed to guide future duties and sensitive decisions, now placed Catherine closer to the center than before. That mattered, because advice inside a palace was never just conversation. It shaped access. It shaped trust. It decided who stood near power before the public even knew power was moving. Camilla waited for reassurance, but Charles gave her none at first. The queen consort watched his face, hoping for outrage, hoping for a quick promise that William had gone too far. Instead, the monarch stayed quiet. That silence wounded her more deeply than refusal, because it told her he understood William's argument. The prince had not written the amendment as rebellion. He had written it as protection. Catherine's name was no longer floating in future language. It had been anchored, and Camilla could feel what that meant. Charles knew William's place as heir gave the change dangerous weight. An heir is the next person in line to the throne, and when that person starts shaping future duties, the palace listens differently. The king still had the power to approve, soften, or halt the amendment, but every choice carried a cost. If he removed Catherine's protections, it would look like a direct rebuke of William's judgment. If he accepted them too quickly, Camilla would feel sacrificed to a future she could not control. A senior advisor explained the danger in a documented palace note prepared for the king's review. The note warned that striking out Catherine's new authority would send a message that Charles did not trust William's vision for the next reign. The monarch set the paper down without speaking. He saw the trap clearly now. Defending Camilla could weaken his son. Defending William could devastate his wife. And Catherine, the woman at the center of the storm, had become both symbol and shield. Camilla watched Charles reach for the pen, and in that moment her composure almost broke. The queen consort understood that one mark could confirm what she feared most, that the palace had begun moving around her, not against her openly, but past her quietly. Charles paused with his hand above the page. William's argument pressed from one side. Camilla's pain pressed from the other. Catherine's future stood between them all. The decision did not explode through the palace. It moved like a cold current, touching every room before anyone dared name it. Fallout in a palace rarely begins with a public statement. It begins with doors opening differently, voices dropping faster, and people avoiding eye contact in corridors they once crossed with confidence. Camilla felt the change before anyone explained it. One aide hesitated before entering her room, and that small pause told her the document had already begun reshaping the world around her. Camilla looked up before the aide spoke. The queen consort already knew something had moved. Charles had not cancelled William's altered language. He had only allowed it to remain under review. But inside the palace, that was enough. Under review meant alive. Under review meant possible. Under review meant Catherine's future position had gained serious weight. A briefing schedule, the daily plan, showing which royals are included in private discussions and official updates, arrived on Camilla's desk, and her eyes went straight to the name that changed everything. Catherine had been added to discussions that once passed through older royal channels. That mattered, because those channels were not only about information, they were about trust, habit, and quiet control. The princess was no longer being treated as a future figure waiting outside the door. She was being brought closer to decisions before the palace had explained anything publicly. Camilla read the schedule twice, then pushed it away with slow pain. The queen consort understood now that the shift was not symbolic, it was practical. It had started to work. Catherine felt the weight of it from the other side. An aide told her Camilla had withdrawn from a planned private tea, and the princess went still. She had not asked to become a wound in another woman's life. She had not asked William to make her name the center of a private struggle. Yet the new reality followed her anyway. Every added meeting, every changed schedule, every lowered voice reminded Catherine that protection could look like victory to the outside world while feeling like guilt inside the family. William learned the palace reaction with a colder face than usual. The prince was told Camilla's closest aides were calling the change a humiliation, and he understood at once that the emotional battle had only begun. A palace note, a written internal message used to record sensitive decisions before they become official, confirmed that Catherine's advisory access would begin quietly, before any public explanation was prepared. William knew why that mattered. Once access began, it would be harder to reverse. Once Catherine entered the room, removing her would look like punishment. Camilla sat alone after the aide left, and the silence around her felt cruel. The queen consort had not lost her title. She had not been publicly stripped of place, but the old certainty was gone, and that was worse because no one could name it without sounding disloyal. Catherine understood that silence too. By the end of the day, the princess made her decision. She could not let William and Camilla keep speaking through documents, schedules, and wounded pride. She would step forward herself. And when Catherine finally stepped out from behind the language written in her name, the entire crisis became human. Catherine did not enter the room as a rival. She entered as someone who understood what it meant to be watched, measured, doubted, and used as a symbol before being treated as a person. Camilla expected triumph in her eyes. Instead, she found exhaustion. And in the silence between them, the succession document stopped feeling like a weapon and started feeling like a wound. Catherine asked for the meeting herself, and that choice changed the feeling of the crisis. No aides, no Charles, no William. No one standing nearby to soften a sentence or rescue either woman from the truth. The princess knew the altered document had made Camilla feel publicly reduced, before a single public word had been spoken. A succession document, the private plan that shapes future royal roles before they are announced, was now carrying emotions no paper could hold. It mattered because names inside that file were not just names. They decided who belonged near power. Camilla watched Catherine carefully, searching for pride, victory, or hidden satisfaction. The queen consort found none of it. Catherine spoke first, and her voice was steady but tired. She said she had not asked William to rewrite the document. She had not pushed the prince to place her name higher, and she had not wanted Camilla to feel cornered by a choice made in silence. But the princess also refused to pretend the protection meant nothing. She knew what delay could do. She knew how easily a future role could be praised in public and weakened in private. Camilla listened, and pain moved across her face before she could hide it. The queen consort admitted she felt erased, not because Catherine had demanded too much, but because everyone else had accepted the change so quickly. Charles had paused instead of stopping it. William had defended it without regret. The advisors had treated it as useful. And suddenly, Camilla felt as if her years beside the king could be respected and still quietly moved around. That was the cruelty of it. No one had shouted her down. They had simply adjusted the future without her. Catherine then revealed, through a private recorded conversation prepared for the king's household record, why William had acted after the Windsor dinner. The princess explained that the prince believed silence had become dangerous after her role was softened, and no one defended it. A household record means a private palace account kept so senior figures can review what was said and why it mattered. Camilla heard the meaning beneath the explanation. William had not acted only to lift Catherine higher. He had acted because he feared she could be weakened when the monarchy needed her most. Camilla did not forgive everything in that moment. Catherine did not ask her to. But something shifted between them. The queen consort finally saw that the amendment was not simply a blade aimed at her place. It was also a shield placed around another woman before the next reign began. The meeting ended without warmth, but not without truth. Camilla left carrying hurt, but also understanding. And by morning, the palace walls could no longer contain what had happened, and the outside world gave the private drama a public face. The monarchy can survive whispers. It can survive closed doors, private tears, and documents locked inside cabinets. But it cannot control the moment a private rupture becomes a public image. By sunrise, Britain was no longer guessing that something had shifted. It was reading it, watching it, arguing over it, and choosing sides between a wounded queen consort and a future queen being pulled toward power. Camilla saw the first coverage at breakfast, and her face went still before anyone dared speak. The queen consort looked at the headline once, then lowered the paper as if the words had crossed the table and touched her directly. The palace had prepared a careful response, but the story broke before officials could shape it. A succession document, the private file, that lays out future royal roles and influence before any public change is announced, had become the center of national argument. That mattered because private royal planning was supposed to stay invisible. Once people saw it, every line became a signal of who was rising and who was being left behind. Catherine read the public reaction with discomfort rather than pride. The princess knew sympathy could be dangerous when it arrived at another woman's expense. Every supportive line about her future role made Camilla's pain look more public. Every commentator praising William's boldness made the queen consort appear weaker. Catherine had not wanted that. She understood that public approval could feel like victory outside the palace while deepening wounds inside it. And still, the story kept growing. William became the center of a sharper debate. The prince was no longer described as a quiet heir waiting his turn. Commentators framed him as a man already shaping the future monarchy around Catherine, not asking permission from the older court. An heir, meaning the next person in line to the throne, carries weight even before wearing the crown. And this moment proved it. William's change to the document now looked like a message. The next reign would not be built slowly by committee. It would be protected early, and Catherine would stand at its heart. A single public moment captured the whole crisis. Outside Buckingham Palace, people stopped near a newspaper stand where the fictional front page read, "William moves to protect Catherine," beside the palace gates at dawn. A broadcaster later called it the first visible handover of emotional power from the current court to the next. That line spread fast because it sounded like what everyone already felt. Camilla had not lost her title, but the story made her look overruled. Catherine had not asked for triumph, but the story made her look chosen. Charles watched the coverage with a heavier expression than anyone around him expected. The king knew the public had chosen its headline, but he still had to choose the meaning. He could let the story become a family wound dressed as royal progress, or he could give the palace a final sentence strong enough to hold everyone in place. Camilla waited for that sentence. William stood by his choice. Catherine feared what support might cost, and inside the palace, Charles began preparing the internal statement that would decide whether the document became division or closure. In the end, the crisis was not settled by noise. It was settled by a sentence. Charles did not erase William's amendment. He did not publicly punish Catherine's rise. He did not pretend Camilla's pain was imaginary. Instead, he gave the monarchy what it needed most, and what the family feared most: a final decision that made the future undeniable. Charles approved the altered language in a softened but still powerful form. The king knew every word mattered now, because the palace was no longer dealing with a private disagreement. It was dealing with the shape of the next reign. The final document, the written plan defining future royal duties, influence, and protected roles, kept William's central intention alive. Catherine would not enter the future undefined. She would not depend on old favor. She would not wait quietly outside the door while others decided how much space she deserved. Camilla received the decision privately, and for a moment she said nothing. The queen consort understood the meaning before anyone explained it. Charles had not rejected her. He had not stripped her place or denied her pain, but he had allowed the monarchy to move beyond her control. That was the wound. That was the truth she had to carry. She remained beside the king, still respected, still recognized, but the old certainty had gone. The future had been named, and Catherine's name stood inside it with force. Catherine felt no victory when she learned the decision. The princess understood that protection could become pressure the moment it was written down. William had defended her, but now the world would expect her to carry more, stand firmer, and become the emotional center of a crown not yet fully hers. She knew Camilla would feel the loss behind the language. She knew Charles had paid a price for accepting it. And she knew the prince had drawn a line that could not easily be erased. William told Charles he would make the same decision again. The prince did not say it with defiance. He said it with the calm of a man who had already measured the cost and accepted it. The future king believed the monarchy could not be built on hesitation. He believed Catherine's role had to be protected before the next storm arrived, not after it had already wounded her. Charles listened, and the king finally understood that his reign had become a bridge. A bridge is not remembered for standing still. It is remembered for carrying others across. Camilla remained queen consort, but Catherine had become the emotional center of the next crown. That was the verdict. William had shown he was ready to defend that future before it officially belonged to him, and Charles had accepted that history was moving through his family faster than anyone expected. There was no final question left hanging over the palace that night, only the unmistakable truth that the crown had begun turning toward Catherine. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.